Sex differences in the autophagy response to obesity represent a fascinating and increasingly important area of research, with profound implications for understanding why obesity manifests and progresses differently in males and females, and why treatments may need to be sex-specific to be truly effective. While autophagy is a universal cellular process essential for maintaining metabolic health, its regulation is influenced by sex hormones, genetic expression, and physiological factors that diverge between men and women. These differences can shape how the body responds to excess fat, how it handles inflammation, and how resilient it is to the metabolic stress of obesity. In general, studies suggest that females may have a more robust baseline autophagic activity in certain tissues, such as the liver and adipose tissue, particularly before menopause. Estrogens appear to enhance autophagy, contributing to better lipid metabolism, improved insulin sensitivity, and greater mitochondrial resilience in females compared to males under similar obesogenic conditions. This might help explain why premenopausal women often exhibit more favorable fat distribution, storing more subcutaneous fat rather than the more dangerous visceral fat common in men, and are somewhat protected against the early onset of obesity-related metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disorders. However, this protective effect is not absolute. In some contexts, particularly with prolonged obesity or in postmenopausal women when estrogen levels decline, autophagy becomes impaired. The loss of estrogen's autophagy-promoting effect can lead to increased fat accumulation in the liver and visceral areas, worsening inflammation and oxidative stress. This transition may explain why metabolic disease risk rises sharply for women after menopause, potentially catching up with or even surpassing that of men. Here, interventions that stimulate autophagy, such as exercise, fasting, or compounds like spermidine, may be especially beneficial in offsetting the hormonal decline and restoring metabolic balance. For males, the story appears more complex. While testosterone has some influence on autophagic processes, its effects are less consistent and not always protective. In fact, some studies have observed that males may exhibit a less responsive autophagy system in the face of high-fat diets, particularly in adipose and liver tissues. This diminished response may contribute to the earlier and more pronounced accumulation of visceral fat, higher insulin resistance, and greater susceptibility to NAFLD in men. However, certain forms of exercise, especially resistance training, seem to more effectively stimulate autophagy in male skeletal muscle, potentially offering a sex-specific metabolic advantage when physical activity is prioritized. What's especially interesting is that these sex-based differences in autophagy may help guide personalized strategies for preventing or treating obesity. For example, premenopausal women may respond more favorably to dietary interventions that align with their naturally higher autophagic capacity, while postmenopausal women might require targeted support, such as phytoestrogens, fasting-mimicking diets, or autophagy-promoting supplements, to compensate for the hormonal shift. Men, on the other hand, may benefit more from exercise-driven interventions that target muscle and visceral fat compartments, where their autophagic response might be more latent, but inducible with sufficient stimulation. Furthermore, emerging research into the genetic regulation of autophagy-related genes shows sex-specific expression patterns, suggesting that some of the differences go beyond hormones. Certain genes like ATG7 or BECLIN-1 may be differently regulated in male and female tissues, which could influence not only susceptibility to obesity, but also the progression of related diseases. Understanding these patterns could eventually enable the development of drugs that target autophagy in a sex-sensitive way, enhancing the effectiveness of treatments while minimizing unintended consequences. In summary, the interplay between sex and autophagy response to obesity is a vivid reminder that biological differences matter deeply in how we understand and approach metabolic health. Autophagy is not a one-size-fits-all system. It's shaped by the hormonal landscape, genetic architecture, and environmental exposures that vary between men and women. Recognizing these distinctions does more than enrich scientific understanding. It opens the door to more precise, personalized, and ultimately more effective interventions in the global fight against obesity. The promise of tailored strategies that harness autophagy according to individual biological context is not just exciting, it is essential for future success.